Today's roundtable is around the thorny issue of pensions, and particularly auto-enrolment, which has been a huge issue for employers up and down the country, and particularly for IOD members. The advent of compulsory auto-enrolment, still to come for smaller businesses, is having a huge impact on employers around the United Kingdom. Because it imposes a significant burden, regulatory legislative requirement with criminal penalties for failure to comply. And many of our members have said how concerned they are about what it's going to mean. They don't have HR departments or the people who can help them with it. We'd like to understand what are the most difficult parts of the process and what you think could be done to improve things.
I think the big challenges for employers are twofold. Really, one is as an employer, as a business organisation, how do I approach auto-enrolment in terms of the operational challenges and the financial challenges that presents to me and my company? The other side of it, which probably hasn't had enough focus because of the operational challenges, is of course the benefits for individual scheme members when they get to retirement, and the quality of the pension scheme in terms of the governance and the investment options available.
Dale, I know you're largely through the process, aren't you? How have you found it?
You know, the idea behind it, all well intended, is to get young people to be part of a pension scheme. But I think having the opt-outs just killed that overnight.
If you think of auto-enrolment, the purpose of auto-enrolment is to make the decision for people effectively. Is to say, it's in your interest to save for your old age, for your retirement. And if you're not going to do that yourself, we're actually going to impose that upon you, subject to an opt-out, of course.
Doesn't there need to be more education about it saving anyway, because pensions clearly have tax breaks, so are very attractive. Save £100 into a pension compared to £100 elsewhere, and that £100 into pension will accumulate to a much bigger sum comparing the same investments.
Is there a thought of linking the pensions with the housing ladder in the same way as we can use pensions to buy property, for commercial property?
When we do our research, we find that 50% of people say, well, I'd save in a pension if I could get at the fund for things like house purchase. The other 50% say, I actually like not being able to touch the thing until 55, because otherwise I'd be tempted to get my hands on it.
Has anyone had success in enthusing or interesting younger people? I mean,
yeah, I think we've been reasonably successful, but if you look at the type of people we employ, they tend to be kind of mostly graduates, but are quite analytical. The time it's taken to get us into the place by our HR team and all that's been quite considerable.
And what about the economic climate and issues like inflation, annuity rates, and the complete uncertainty? I mean, none of us know what inflation's going to be in 10 years.
Well, that's right. What's happened is with the move away from final salary pensions to the money purchase pension schemes, which most people use for auto-enrolment, the employer has passed the funding risk and the longevity risk and the inflation risk and investment risk. They've passed all of that from the employer over to the employees, and we need to give people in workforces much more help, education, guidance, support.
I think that that risk, and in a perverse way, being passed to the employees kind of infused some of our younger employees to kind of get involved and start investing in pensions.
Can I ask those of you who've implemented auto-enrolment or who are doing it, who helped you? Who did you turn to for advice and support?
We did a whole session on it, and then we offered them all sort of one-to-ones. And that was okay, but just didn't feel that we could have done with a bit more support.
The financial advisors that we were using and kind of set up our group personal pension scheme in the first place, they didn't really know too much. They weren't particularly well prepared. So in the end, we actually went straight to the pension provider, got a really good contact there and a day-to-day contact and managed it that way. So we kind of cut them out of the process, which made things a lot easier.
I think if you are going through the process, it's important to talk to people who've already done it. If you're going to speak to somebody, make sure it's somebody who's actually gone through the process already.
We actually purchased an off-the-shelf system to help us with auto-enrolment, which actually was really good.
Peter, can I ask you, aren't there an awful lot of layers between the provider and the recipient, and couldn't some of them be eliminated?
I think the answer is probably yes, but it takes time. But an ideal solution for me would be a payroll system with integrated auto-enrolment that has an electronic linkage into your pension scheme, and that will make it much simpler for future stagers. It takes an awful lot of preparation, starting early and engaging all the participants, your IT departments, your payroll provider, your pension provider, your financial advisor. So starting early and engaging people in terms of creating a joined up project plan seemed to be the big themes that were coming through.
We did most of the work ourselves. We did have an IFA working alongside us, but we did, because we're at the top end of his client base, he didn't really have any knowledge of the process.
There's a serious problem ahead for many smaller businesses just in complying with these 580 pages of pension regulator rules.
Anyone who's got a casual afternoon can obviously research it for themselves.
And for a smaller business, it doesn't have a legal team and an HR director and an IT director. Working through that could be a bit of a challenge.
What would you do differently if you were starting from scratch now? And what's your advice to other IOD members who are going to be doing this for the first time?
So I think start early, involve as many as you can, but I realise for very small businesses that's quite a big ask.
It's a lot of extra work, yeah.
It's not about reading that 500-page document about what it is, but then it asks the question, doesn't it? How do you select a good advisor?
When we started out, I'd want to see case studies and real life, and I perhaps want to talk to other members who've been through it to say, what was your experience, what's the pitfalls?
So we know from what members are saying to us that the first port of call for smaller employers will be their accountant, who normally does the payroll. So these people are going to be the first port of call, and many of them are unprepared for it.
Let me broaden things just slightly and say, what would you like the pension system to look like?
I'm hearing from some parts of the research that people are just going, why don't we just make this compulsory? And then if I'm paying you £10 this week, £1 of that goes into the pension scheme. And that makes it so much easier.
This is too complicated for private individuals. This is a social issue, this is a government issue, not something that should be left to a private individual.
This auto-enrolment scheme is 2% at the moment. That's ridiculous. That's not going to pay for any sort of pension.
The interesting question is the role of the employer in all of this. Employers can't afford to take back those costs and those risks. But we've set up an infrastructure for auto-enrolment that places employers squarely in the middle of all of this with no real need. What we probably want to try and achieve in the short term is to remove as many decisions from the process as possible. So remove all of the decisions from the employer, remove all of the decisions from the employees, and just make it a mechanical exercise, and that would simplify things in the short term. I thought it was a fantastic opportunity, bringing experts from the industry together with people from business who have been doing auto-enrolment for real, and it was a good mixture of theory and practice.
I thought it was a very interesting discussion, a very wide-ranging discussion. I think that what came out was the challenges, the difficulties that people have faced.
So the message has got to be, get engaged with this and start your project early, because if you don't, you'll run into trouble.